There are nights when you lie down, yet your heart has never truly rested. The explanations left unfinished, the wounds never given a name, the decisions you still haven't dared to make for yourself. All of them turn into a quiet noise that slowly pulls you away from who you really are. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And perhaps you have walked through life for too long, trying to please the world so long that you've forgotten what your own soul has been asking for. This video will be a moment of returning to your inner world, where you don't need to justify yourself, don't need to pretend to be strong, and don't need to make anyone else happy. It is just you, your breath, and the truth you've been avoiding for far too long. Today, you will hear the call from within, the call of healing, the call of choosing yourself, the call of the rebirth that Jung describes as a return to the true self. If you are ready to lay down your burdens, step into silence and choose yourself. Then let this journey begin. The obsession with explaining everything is a wound, not a personality trait. There is a silent kind of pain that very few people ever recognize, the obsession with having to explain everything about yourself, explaining why you're tired, explaining why you're sad, and explaining why you're quiet, and explaining why you need rest, and explaining things that should never have required words in the first place. And little by little, we forget that only those who have been dismissed, doubted, or invalidated ever learn to live this way, as if their very existence needs permission. In the thought system of Carl Gustav Jung, this isn't introversion, hypersensitivity, or perfectionism. It is the imprint of a psychological wound. We are not born with the habit of justifying every small feeling within us. We learned it. We were taught it. We were forced to become it. We grew up surrounded by demands to behave, to be reasonable, to not trouble the adults, to make others comfortable, and children, in order to be loved, to be accepted, will do anything. They learn to watch the eyes of their parents, the tone of their teachers, the reactions of their peers, and then reshape their emotions accordingly. Eventually, they no longer feel that their feelings belong to them. They become actors in life far too early. Jung once said in The Development of Personality, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. It is frightening to admit that one's inner being, the original, fragile, imperfect self, filled with needs, has never truly been accepted, not by others, but by oneself." So we move through life as if standing in a courtroom. Tired, you must explain it. Sad, you must justify it. Silent, you must offer a valid reason, as if there is an invisible verdict hanging over your head. If you don't explain, you will be abandoned. That is not a personality trait. It is the memory of a child who once learned that your feelings bother people. As adults, we carry that memory like an invisible backpack. Inside it are whispers. I'm sorry for being tired. I'm sorry I can't endure anymore. I'm sorry for being different. I'm sorry for being myself. This obsession has seeped deep into the unconscious. Jung called these patterns complexes, clusters of psychological energy accumulated from the past, silently steering us in the present. In Aion, he wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. As long as we refuse to face our fear of rejection, it continues to control us. We talk too much, apologize too much, explain too much. We believe that if we don't explain ourselves, we will lose someone's love. But in truth, what we fear losing is not other people. It is the chance to exist without being judged. And so, explaining becomes a survival strategy. Some people explain everything because they want to be understood, but most explain because they fear being misunderstood. And deeper than that, they fear no one will stand with them. In Jungian psychology, when we live too far from the true self, we begin operating through the persona, the social mask. This mask is designed for others to feel comfortable, reassured, pleased with us. The problem is, the mask cannot feel emotions. So, whenever a real part of us speaks, "I'm tired, I'm sad, I'm not okay," we rush to justify it so we don't feel guilty. Sometimes, explaining is not just a habit. It is how we soothe the fear that we are not enough. Jung called this the split between the ego and the shadow. The shadow holds all the parts we were taught to suppress: our softness, our needs, our anger, our longing to be loved unconditionally. We fear the shadow so much that whenever it rises, we hurry to explain it away. But the paradox is this: the shadow does not disappear when hidden. It only becomes a whisper, urging us to live out of alignment with who we truly are. And that is why we are exhausted. When someone feels the need to constantly explain, it reveals that they do not believe they are worthy of unconditional existence. When someone feels guilty for needing rest, it shows their nervous system was wired during years of having to please others. Healing, from Jung's perspective, is not about becoming stronger. It is about returning to the true self, to the person who never needed permission to feel. In Psychological Types, Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The greatest privilege of life is not being loved. It is being allowed to be yourself." But to do that, we must slowly remove the chains of self-justification. We must understand, you do not need to explain why you're sad. You do not need to justify why you need rest. You do not need permission to be yourself. Your existence already carries its own authority. Only when we understand this can we begin the deeper healing, the right to exist without explaining. This is where individuation begins the journey back to the true self, by allowing the rejected parts to finally step into the light. Freedom does not begin by changing the world. It begins in the moment you tell yourself, "I don't need to explain everything anymore. I am allowed to feel. I am allowed to exist." And that silence, the silence of someone who has returned to their inner essence, is the first step toward inner freedom. 2e. The difference between speaking from self-love and speaking from the fear of losing love. In the previous part, we explored a hidden wound, the obsession with explaining everything as a way of asking for permission to exist. And from that wound, another branch of fear naturally forms, the fear of losing love. It slips into our words, shapes our expression, and distorts our ways of connecting with others. If part 1 was, "I'm sorry for being myself," then part 2 is, "I'm saying this because I'm afraid you'll leave if I stay silent." These two parts are not separate. They are two faces of the same unconscious mechanism. Carl Jung once said in 2 essays on analytical psychology, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. When we cannot bear the real pain, the pain of being dismissed, undervalued, or unloved in the right way, we create a substitute pain, talking too much, explaining too much, justifying too much. It is our way of avoiding the truth that we are living through fear, not through self-love. 1. When we speak from the fear of being abandoned. There are moments when our mouth says, "I'm fine," yet every cell in our body trembles with fear. Fear of losing that person, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being left behind, fear of not being enough. And it is that very fear that turns every sentence into an act of self-defense. People think we are communicating, but in reality, we are begging for safety. When we speak from fear, our voice is no longer an expression. It becomes a testimony in court. We are simultaneously the defendant afraid of being condemned, the lawyer desperately trying to protect ourselves, and the judge evaluating every emotion with scrutiny. Alone, we create an entire inner trial. Jung described this state in The Undiscovered Self. The more uncertain is our grasp of what we are, the more insecure becomes our moral posture. When we don't know who we are, we begin to moralize our own feelings, feeling guilty simply for having needs, limits, and wounds. And then, words become negotiation. We speak to keep someone. We speak to buy acceptance. We speak to prevent someone from leaving. We speak because we believe that silence will make love slip through our fingers. But love is not something that fragile. 2. When we speak from self-love. In contrast, when a person speaks from self-love, their voice transforms completely. No more trembling, no more justification, no more asking for permission, no more apologizing for their truth. Someone who speaks from self-love doesn't need long, elaborate sentences filled with explanations. They speak less, but every word carries fullness. It is a fullness not of language, but of presence, a deep-rooted belief that I am worthy, I am enough. And if my truth makes someone walk away, then that is not the love I need. In Collected Works 14, Jung wrote, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life. When we accept ourselves, we no longer compromise our values just to be loved. Our words become whole because they are not meant to change anyone, not meant to control anyone, not meant to keep anyone. They are simply meant to express truth." 3. Silence, the boundary of self-respect. When speaking from self-love, sometimes words are no longer needed. Silence is no longer a fear, but a sacred boundary, a whisper of maturity. I no longer need to persuade you of my truth. Silence born from self-love is not withdrawing out of fear. It is standing still out of completeness. It is the silence of peace, not the silence of hurt. The silence of someone who knows their worth, not the silence of someone trembling with worry. Jung expressed this profoundly in Modern Man, In Search of a Soul. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And sometimes, becoming who you truly are means staying silent in places where your truth is not respected. 4. Why does our voice change when we fear losing love? On the deepest level of psychology, the fear of losing love always ties back to complex old experiences trapped in the unconscious. Those who were ignored, dismissed, or emotionally neglected as children often grow up believing that love is conditional. They believe they must earn love. They must be pleasant, easy, agreeable, not troublesome, not emotional. In CW7, Jung wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power. When we love ourselves, we don't need power to hold others close. When we are afraid, we use words as instruments of control to control the other's feelings, their reactions, and ultimately the outcome. But real love requires none of that." 5. How do we know where we speak from? The sign is unmistakable. Speaking from fear, too many words, constant explanations, anxiety, when the other person is silent, expecting the worst, rewriting and correcting everything we said, speaking from self-love, fewer words, clear, direct, enough, no persuasion, respecting silence, knowing when to walk away when unheard. 6. The difference lies in the root, not in the words. What Jung wants us to understand is this: the root of every behavior lives in the unconscious. When we speak from fear, our words are the result of an unhealed complex. When we speak from self-love, our words are the result of an ego slowly coming into harmony with the self, the true self. And the miracle happens when we finally begin to love ourselves. We don't just speak differently, we become different. We no longer use words to cling to love outside, because we have rediscovered the love within. 3. Healing silence versus destructive silence. After moving through part 2, where we understood that our voice can come from fear or from self-love, we naturally arrive at a deeper question: what about silence? If speech has two natures, then silence does too. Not every silence is peace. Not every silence is healing. And not every silence is a sign of inner strength. Some silences open the soul, and others make the soul bleed. Carl Jung once wrote in The Relations Between the Ego and the Unconscious, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." When we stay silent out of fear, we do not make the pain disappear. We simply push it deeper, and in the dark, it grows. This is where the split between the two types of silence becomes clear. 1. Silence born from fear. The silence that makes the soul bleed. There are forms of silence that are anything but gentle. It is the kind of silence that tightens your chest, locks your throat, fills your mind with thousands of questions, and yet you cannot voice a single one. It is the silence of swallowing your truth, so others won't be uncomfortable. The silence of swallowing your anger, so you don't lose love. The silence of swallowing yourself, just to keep the peace. The silence rooted in the belief that your feelings do not deserve to be heard. This is the kind of silence that feels like swallowing glass, each shard cutting the inside of your being, causing wounds no one can see. The pain has no sound, but it has weight. It presses on your chest, drains your energy, and distances you from your own self. Jung described this as a split between the ego and the shadow, when the conscious self tries to appear fine, while the darkness within screams from being silenced. In Aion, Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Silence born from fear hides your light, but it also hides your darkness. You do not become brighter, you simply fade." The most dangerous part is this silence, born from fear, creates self-betrayal. Every time you stay silent to make someone else comfortable, you move further away from yourself. Every time you swallow words you needed to say, you reinforce a false belief. I don't matter. A person can live many years in this kind of silence, but no one can live peacefully in it. 2. Silence by choice. The silence of strength and freedom. But silence is not only darkness. There is another kind of silence. Silence like candlelight. Silence like meditation. Silence like an inner sanctuary. Not an escape, a return. Not fear, maturity. It is the silence of someone who no longer needs to justify themselves. The silence of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. The silence of someone who knows their inner truth, requires no approval. It is the silence of self-love. This kind of silence does not choke you. It expands your inner space. It doesn't constrict your chest. It lets you breathe deeper. It is like an inner temple where you whisper to yourself, I see you. I believe you. I choose you. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul. Jung wrote, the greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. Silence by choice is how we outgrow pain, not through argument or explanation, but by standing firmly in our true self. In that space, we do not try to fix others, nor do we try to make ourselves more convenient for anyone. We simply remain with ourselves. Silence by choice is the highest form of self-respect. It tells the world, I will not participate in conversations that wound my soul. I will not lose myself just to keep you. My worth is measured not by noise, but by inner peace. 3. The difference lies in the motivation beneath, not in the volume. Two people can be silent at the same time and be living entirely different realities. One is silent to avoid being disliked. One is silent to avoid betraying themselves. One is silent because they've been cornered. One is silent because they've found their path. One is silent to avoid the storm outside. One is silent to listen to the storm within. The difference lies in the unconscious motivation, not the appearance. This is the essence of what Jung repeatedly emphasized. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Aion. When fear is the motive, silence leads you astray. When self-love is the motive, silence leads you home. 4. How do you know which silence is yours? Ask yourself, does this silence make me lighter or heavier? Does this silence expand me or shrink me? Does this silence help me see myself or make me disappear? Is this silence a boundary or a chain? Is this silence a choice or a self-betrayal? If silence makes you smaller, it is silence born from fear. If silence makes you more whole, it is silence born from self-love. If part 2 showed us that speech can come from love or fear, then part 3 shows us the reverse is also true. Silence can arise from two opposite natures. Only when we distinguish them can we know how to speak when speech is needed and how to remain silent when silence is freedom. In both cases, the goal is the same: to return to the true self, where both your voice and your silence are guided by self-love, not the fear of losing love. 4. The right to choose yourself without needing to justify it. When we have learned to distinguish between the two forms of silence, the silence that makes us disappear and the silence that brings us home, a new door opens. And behind that door lies an even more important, deeper, and more powerful question. If self-love gives us the right to be silent, do we also have the right to choose ourselves even when the world disapproves? This is the inevitable shift after part 3. Because the person who has learned to be silent out of freedom will soon learn an even greater lesson: the right to prioritize oneself without needing to justify anything. Carl Jung once wrote in The Undiscovered Self, "Freedom is the privilege of the self-conscious mind. Freedom, including the freedom to choose yourself, does not come from the approval of others. It comes from a mind that has awakened, that is aware, that is strong enough to stand beside its own true self." 1. The moment you put yourself first, that is a moment of rebirth. There comes a moment in every person's life, a moment when they are exhausted from chasing acceptance, exhausted from pleasing, exhausted from explaining, exhausted from proving, exhausted from always being good in someone else's eyes. That is when the soul begins to whisper, "And what about you who listens to your pain, who protects your boundaries?" And then, if you are brave enough, you make the first decision that comes from your true self. You choose yourself. Choosing yourself is saying no without trembling. Choosing yourself is stepping back without needing to explain. Choosing yourself is no longer asking for permission to be tired, to be sad, to rest. Choosing yourself is no longer shrinking to maintain someone's presence. In Collected Works 7, Jung wrote a famous line: "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This is not a gentle process. It is a rebirth, because to become yourself, you must bury the older versions, the version that begged to be loved, that pleaded to be chosen, that tried desperately not to be abandoned. When you choose yourself, you are forced to kill the part of you that lived in fear. And this is exactly the rebirth ritual Jung describes in the process of individuation, the return of the ego to the true self. 2. Choosing yourself means burying the version that begged to be chosen. In Jungian healing, there is a painful but essential truth. We have spent much of our lives waiting to be chosen. Chosen to be loved. Chosen to stay. Chosen to be worthy. Chosen to be seen. Chosen to not be abandoned. And in the process, we became accustomed to placing our worth in the hands of others. When we start choosing ourselves, we are not only changing our external patterns, we are dismantling a complex buried deep within the unconscious, the complex of believing, I have value only when someone needs me. Jung described this in 2 essays on analytical psychology. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. Many people grow up believing they must meet expectations to be loved, and in adulthood, they repeat that same pattern in love and in every relationship. Choosing yourself is the act that ends that cycle. It is the moment you say, I will no longer beg to be chosen. I choose myself. This is not selfishness. It is the maturity of the soul. 3. The loneliness. After choosing yourself, not a punishment, but a sacred space. When you begin to put yourself first, some people will leave. But not because you are wrong. They leave because they were accustomed to the version of you with no boundaries. The loneliness that follows often brings confusion. Am I being too much? Am I asking for too much? Am I losing everyone? But that loneliness is not a punishment. It is a sacred emptiness the universe creates for you to rebuild yourself. If you continue to fill that space with relationships that do not respect you, you will never hear the voice of your true self. Jung wrote in the Red Book, solitude is not withdrawal, it is elevation. Loneliness does not pull you down, it lifts you up. Loneliness does not separate you from the world, it brings you closer to yourself. In that space, the soul finally has room to breathe, to heal, to ask, who am I when I am not pleasing anyone? What do I want when no one has to approve? What is my worth when it is not measured by someone's affection? These are the questions that open the door to individuation, the phase where you live your life, not the life others want you to live. 4. Your worth is no longer a bargaining chip. One of the most important steps in spiritual maturity is realizing your worth is not something you must negotiate. Yet most of us were raised in environments that taught, you must be good to be accepted. You must endure pain to be loved. You must sacrifice to be valued. You must please others to stay. We grew up believing our worth depended on what we gave to others. But in modern man, in search of a soul, Jung affirms the individual is the only reality, the only thing real, the only thing worth protecting is the individual, the authentic self, not the role society asks us to play. And when we truly choose ourselves, we begin to understand you don't need to give yourself away to be loved. You don't need to strain to keep anyone. You don't need to prove your worth. You don't need to justify your boundaries. You don't need permission to walk away. The worth of a soul is not measured by its ability to endure. It is measured by its honesty with its true self. If Part 4 teaches us the right to choose ourselves without justification, then the upcoming Part 5, will go deeper into a central idea of Jungian psychology, the right to choose your inner truth, and the right to protect it from places unworthy of it. Because when you choose yourself, you will begin to see clearly. Not everyone deserves to hear your truth, and that is the doorway to the next chapter. 5. Not everyone deserves to hear the raw truth within you. After we move through part 4, where we learn to choose ourselves without justification and place our true self at the center, a natural shift happens. We begin to realize that the truth within us is sacred, and not everyone is safe enough to be allowed near it. Choosing yourself is not only an act of freedom, it is an act of purification, deciding where the soul is allowed to open. And right here, we enter part 5. Not everyone deserves to hear your raw, unfiltered truth. Carl Jung once wrote in The Symbolic Life, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Every encounter carries the potential for transformation, but also the risk of damage. That is why opening your heart is a sacred act, because it gives someone else the power to touch something deeply real within you." 1. When sincerity has been weaponized. The pain of those who love deeply and trust too quickly. Most of us have lived through this. We open our heart. We share real pain. We reveal hidden corners no one has seen. We believe our sincerity will be held with care, but instead we are judged, we are belittled, we are humiliated. Worse, the very wounds we shared are used against us. Jung warned of this in Memories, Dreams, Reflections. The most dangerous thing in life is to expose one's naked soul to the wrong person. Not everyone is mature enough to hold someone else's truth without breaking it. Some people don't understand, but some are worse. They don't want to understand. They enjoy the power we unintentionally give them when we reveal our vulnerability. They use the trembling words we once spoke in trust to manipulate, control, or harm us. And after experiences like these, many people choose the extreme solution: I will never open up again. But that is not the Jungian lesson. Total self-concealment is also a form of self-destruction. The soul needs to be seen, but in the right places. 2. The lesson is not to stay silent forever, but to choose the right recipient. Your truth is a flame. In the right places, it illuminates. In the wrong places, it burns. The issue is not the brightness of your light. It is whether someone has the capacity to look at that light without flinching or turning away. In Psychological Types, Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. But this also implies the reverse. Everything we reveal to someone who does not understand us will hurt us more, not help us grow." The essence here is the categorization of souls. Some listen to judge, some listen to control, some listen to satisfy curiosity. Only a few listen to truly understand. Your truth must be protected as a sacred part of your being, like a teacher guarding a student's secret, like a lover holding the wound of the one they cherish, like a soul that fears the dark night but honors the light. Choosing the right person to confide in is not selfishness. It is emotional wisdom at the highest level. 3. Both speech and silence are gifts and must be given to the right places. One of the deepest realizations in Jungian psychology is this: Your inner truth is a spiritual resource. You have the right to offer it, and you have the right to withhold it. Many people think sharing and being authentic means saying everything, revealing everything, explaining everything. But that is not true. Jung often emphasized that the ego is only a small fragment of the psyche, and the rest belongs to the unconscious, a realm not everyone deserves to enter. In the Red Book, Jung wrote, "Some things are not to be shared. They can only be lived. Some truths must be lived, not explained. Some pains must be felt, not narrated. Some parts of the soul must be protected, not displayed as proof of intimacy. Speech is a gift, for it grants someone the privilege of knowing you. Silence is also a gift, for it grants you the power to protect yourself. For we learn to open only where the soul feels safe. Safe does not mean completely guaranteed. No one can guarantee that. Safe means a frequency, a depth, a subtle recognition that the soul senses immediately when encountering another soul. They do not compare you to others. They do not use your truth to judge you. They do not rush to fix you. They listen to understand, not to counter. They allow you to be yourself without redefining you." Jung wrote in the archetypes and the collective unconscious. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. A worthy person is someone who supports that journey, not distorts it. A worthy person is someone with whom you can open your heart without being hurt. Reveal yourself without feeling ashamed. Share truth without being dismissed. Speak honestly without needing to defend yourself. These are safe souls, and we must learn to recognize them. If Part 4 was the lesson of choosing yourself, then Part 5 is the lesson of choosing where your heart is allowed to open. Choosing yourself is the foundation. Choosing where to open is the protection. Together, they form the backbone of the Jungian healing journey, because after you learn to stand with yourself, you must also learn one more truth. Not everyone deserves to stand close to your truth. And with that understanding, you step into the next stage, Part 6, where you will face the reality that enlightenment is not glittering light, but a process of collapse, emptiness, and rebirth. 6. Enlightenment is not glittering light, but a phase of collapse, emptiness, and limbo. After learning the lesson in Part 5 that your inner truth should not be given away freely, that not everyone deserves to witness the rawest parts of your soul, something new begins to emerge when you stop proving yourself. Stop pleasing. Stop opening your heart in the wrong places. Everything that once kept you upright begins to shake. You think this is wrong, but in truth, it is the first sign of what Jung called an individuation crisis, the trembling before the soul is reborn. And that leads us to Part 6. Enlightenment is not glittering light, but a phase of collapse, emptiness, limbo. 1. Awakening is not an explosion of motivation. It is a moment of extinguishing. Many misunderstand awakening as strength, clarity, and overflowing energy. But in Carl Jung's depth psychology, the first step of awakening is not illumination, it is extinction. The extinguishing of old goals, the extinguishing of old ambitions, the extinguishing of dreams built on the expectations of others. the extinguishing of the should become parts of you that never belong to your true self. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. No awakening happens without the pain of collapse. This is the first truth to awaken. You must touch the meaninglessness of what no longer fits. 2. The limbo phase, no longer who you were. Not yet who you are becoming. When the old structures collapse, the soul enters a stage many describe as empty, floating, undefined, not knowing who I am anymore." Jung called this the transitional void. It is not dangerous. It is simply unfamiliar. You are no longer your old self, the one who lived for others. You have not yet become your new self, the one who lives from the true self. You stand between two shores where everything is foggy and formless. Jung described this in the Red Book. Where there is no form, there is no transformation. When the old forms dissolve, that is the very moment transformation begins inside you. The limbo phase is like the cocoon of a butterfly. From the outside it looks useless, but inside, a miraculous reconfiguration is happening. You think you are paused, but you are being rewritten. You think you are weaker, but you are shedding an old shell. You think you are lost, but your true self is beginning to rise. 3. Collapse is a necessary part of awakening. Many fear this stage so much that they run back to who they used to be familiar, but false. They cling to what once hurt them, because at least they know how to live with it. But collapse, in Jungian psychology, is a ritual. It is the sacred disintegration before the true self can be born. In Psychological Types, Jung wrote, "The individual has to struggle to keep from being submerged by the collective. A person must fight not to be drowned by the collective self, the expectations, roles, and norms imposed by society. Collapse is the sign that you are breaking free from that collective identity, and only when you allow yourself to fall apart, to empty out, to not know anymore, can the real journey begin." 4. Emptiness is the space of rebirth, not failure. During limbo, many panic because emptiness feels like death. The chest feels hollow. What once held meaning now feels faded. Ambitions slip away like sand. But Jung reminds us of something essential in Aion. The self is not only the center, but also the whole circumference. When the ego dissolves, the self finally has space to expand. What you are experiencing is not loss, it is liberation. Emptiness is the necessary space for the new to form. Imagine rebuilding a house you cannot construct on top of old, decaying foundations. It must be dismantled, cleared, emptied, given open space. The soul is the same. It needs a period of nothingness to create everything. In the Red Book, Jung wrote, "I must let go. For the new to come, and to let go, you must be empty." 5. Limbo is not the end. It is the gateway to individuation. Many mistake the floating, undefined, hollow phase as a sign they've gone wrong. But in the journey of individuation, the journey of becoming oneself, Limbo is an unskippable milestone. It gives you time to shed the old image, space to hear your real voice, silence to recognize what truly matters, opportunity to reassemble your value system. A gateway into the self. The truth is, no one becomes their true self without collapsing once. No one finds their real identity without passing through limbo. No one awakens in light without first being submerged in darkness. If Part 5 taught you that the soul needs safe places to open, then Part 6 reveals something deeper. To recognize safe places, you must know where you are on your awakening journey. You cannot choose the right person to open your heart to if you yourself cannot distinguish your true self from your old identity. This is why the empty phase, the limbo, is not a delay, but preparation. It is the moment the soul retreats into darkness to reconfigure itself before it can return to the world with new clarity. And from this disintegration, you move to the next chapter, Part 7, where you face the truth that anxiety and depression, through Jung's lens, are not enemies, but messages. 7. Anxiety and depression, through Jung's lens, messages, not enemies. After passing through Part 6, where the soul enters the limbo phase of emptiness, collapse, and uncertainty, we begin to notice something remarkable. The darkest emotions often appear right at the threshold of rebirth. If the disintegration of Part 6 is the door that opens into the dark, then Part 7 is the voice coming from within that darkness. Jung never saw the dark as an enemy. He saw it as a messenger, and through that lens, anxiety and depression are not symptoms to eliminate, but letters from the unconscious, signals the soul sends upward when life has drifted too far away from the true self. 1. Anxiety. The alarm bell when we are living the wrong future. In modern life, anxiety is seen as a sign of weakness, lack of control, or mental instability. But Jung held a very different perspective. In The Undiscovered Self, he wrote, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Anxiety does not disappear by denial. It disappears only when we accept that it is trying to say something." For Jung, anxiety is often not a reaction to the present, but a reaction to the future we are forcing ourselves into. Even though the soul knows that future is not meant for us, anxiety is the alarm bell that we are forcing ourselves into a role that is not ours. We are living a script written by someone else. We are clinging to an image the true self has outgrown. We are walking toward a future the soul does not want. Anxiety is like a guardian standing at the gate of the future. If the direction is right, it is quiet. If the direction is wrong, it rings its warning. Thus, anxiety is not the destroyer of life. It is the protector of the self. In The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, Jung wrote, "Anxiety is the mark of spiritual insecurity, not mental instability, but spiritual unrest, a sacred unrest whispering, you are moving away from yourself." 2. Depression. The deliberate collapse of the old self. If anxiety is a message about the future, then depression is a message from the past. a past unacknowledged, unseen, and unhealed. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung wrote his famous line, "Depression is like a woman in black. If she turns up, don't shoo her away. Invite her in, offer her a seat, and listen to what she has to say." Depression does not come to destroy us. It comes to whisper, "There is something you have neglected for far too long." For Jung, depression is the dimming of the old ego's energy, the soul's forced pause, the necessary collapse before reconstruction, the demand to face what has been buried. Depression is the moment the ego can no longer uphold its masks. It is exhausted, it shatters, and the unconscious rises not to annihilate the ego, but to restore balance. Depression, in Jung's view, always brings the possibility of rebirth. He called this the regressive restoration of the persona, a retreat necessary for the true self to re-emerge. 3. Anxiety and depression are messages, not accusations. Through a Jungian lens, anxiety and depression should never be seen as enemies. They are two sacred languages through which the unconscious communicates. Anxiety says, "You are about to step in the wrong direction." Depression says, "You have been walking the wrong path for too long." Both lead us back to the same place, the inner truth. In Ion, Jung wrote, "The self is our life's goal and the core of our being." Anxiety and depression are two pathways guiding us back to that center, a center we abandoned while chasing roles, labels, images, and expectations. 4. They do not need to be cured away. They need to be heard and interpreted. One of the greatest mistakes of the modern age is treating all emotional unrest as something that must be eliminated. But for Jung, the goal is not to erase emotion, but to understand what it is saying. In CW 11, Psychology and Religion, he wrote, "Emotion is the chief source of all becoming conscious. Emotion, even the darkest ones, is the force that expands consciousness. Without emotion, there is no awakening. Without crisis, there is no transformation. Anxiety does not need to be extinguished. It needs to be heard. Depression does not need to be pushed away. It needs to be invited in." Jungian psychology does not aim to remove symptoms, but to begin a dialogue with the unconscious. 5. When are anxiety and depression messages, not warnings of danger? When they come with signs like feeling life drift away from your real values, living a role that no longer fits, exhaustion from maintaining the image of being strong, suppressing emotions, memories, and needs, feeling stuck between the old self and the emerging self. These are not illnesses. They are thresholds of individuation, moments when the ego cracks so the true self can rise. This pain is not meaningless. It is an invitation. If Part 6 revealed the death of the old ego in the limbo stage, then Part 7 is the language the soul speaks in that darkness to call you home. Anxiety and depression are knocks from the unconscious. There is something you must revisit. There is a part of you that needs to be freed. And if we listen with courage, we step into the next chapter of the Jungian journey, where we must face one of the most powerful forces in depth psychology, the shadow. 8. The shadow. The rejected part of us that holds the greatest power. After moving through part 7, where anxiety and depression appeared as messages rather than enemies, we begin to see something deeper. Those dark, heavy, tangled emotions never came from the sky. They rose from within us, from a territory Jung named with reverence the shadow. And when we start listening to anxiety, when we sit with depression, when we stop fighting the darkness, we begin hearing the voice of the part of the soul we have exiled for far too long. That is the moment the journey into part 8 begins, confronting the shadow, the most secret yet most powerful force in the human psyche. The shadow is not just what's bad. It contains talent, desire, and forbidden truths. In modern psychology, many equate the shadow with darkness, toxicity, or the bad side of personality. But in Jungian psychology, the shadow is never merely evil. It is simply the part of ourselves we were taught to reject. Dreams dismissed by family as unrealistic, power that was shut down by the environment, needs labeled as selfish, emotions that were judged, talents that were neglected, truths that were forbidden to acknowledge. In Ion, Jung wrote, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Everyone carries a shadow, and the more we deny it, the darker and more dangerous it becomes. The shadow is not the enemy. The shadow is the exiled soul." 2. When we don't recognize the shadow, it operates underground, stronger than anything conscious. The frightening thing is not that we have a shadow. The frightening thing is not knowing how it operates. 1. What we hate most in others is often what we reject in ourselves. Why do some people irritate us instantly? Why do certain behaviors trigger us so deeply? Jung explained this in CW9I, Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. We hate in others what we were forbidden to express in ourselves. We resent what we were told we must never be. What we cannot bear in others is often the part of ourselves that has hardened into shadow. 2. Self-sabotage, self-destruction, self-betrayal, because the other half of the soul is locked in the dark. When the shadow is unrecognized, it controls us from below. We ruin relationships when we crave connection. We lower ourselves when the soul wants to rise. We fail at the exact moment we want to succeed. We repeat old cycles of pain without understanding why. In psychology and religion, Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The shadow will direct our lives from the dark, and we will call it destiny." People are not unhappy because fate is cruel. They suffer because the shadow has been imprisoned for too long. 3. The shadow is not only darkness. It holds the greatest reservoir of power. Most of what we call inner strength, courage, creativity, passion Instinctual vitality lies inside the shadow. We rejected these parts because we feared judgment, but they are the very source of our aliveness. In the practice of psychotherapy, Jung wrote, "In the shadow is the gold. Inside the shadow there is always gold, not light but raw, unrefined gold, the power we once abandoned." The shadow is not only what we are ashamed of. The shadow is what we forgot to honor. 4. Shadow integration. Facing it, rewriting it, speaking to it. Shadow integration is not indulgence, not I do whatever I want, not chaos. Shadow integration means inviting the exiled part to speak, so it no longer operates in the dark, but enters the conscious mind. This is essential to individuation. Step 1. Facing it. Admitting that within us live the parts we once hated, emotions we denied, instincts we felt ashamed of. In the philosophical tree, Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." We do not awaken by imagining light. We awaken by bringing the darkness into awareness. Step 2. Rewriting the story. When facing the shadow, we learn to rewrite the narrative. Why do I hate this so much? Who told me I must never be like this? What belief was forced upon me? What part of me has been buried alive? We rewrite our story more fairly, more gently, more truthfully. Step 3. Dialogue instead of escape. We ask the shadow, "What do you need? What are you afraid of? What have you been trying to tell me for so many years?" The shadow always answers through emotions, memories, impulses we fear to face. But the moment we listen, the shadow stops sabotaging us. It becomes an ally. 5. When the shadow is integrated, we live with consciousness, not blind reaction. A person who integrates the shadow judges others less, sabotages themselves less, is less controlled by emotion, is less dragged down by the past, knows their boundaries and needs, lives with wholeness rather than a split soul. The shadow is the doorway to the self, and those who refuse to face the shadow will repeat the same life with the same pain over and over again. If Part 7 taught us that anxiety and depression are messages from the unconscious, then Part 8 reveals who in the unconscious is sending those messages: the shadow. The shadow calls us. The shadow wants to be seen. The shadow wants to return to the table of dialogue. And only when we enter Part 8 does the individuation journey truly begin. Because before becoming our true self, we must reconcile with the part of us we have feared the most. 9. Persona, the social mask, and the crisis that begins when the mask cracks. When we leave Part 8, where we confronted the shadow, the rejected yet most powerful part of us, we suddenly realize something profound. If the shadow is the exiled fragment of the soul, hidden in darkness, then the persona is the mask we wear to hide that darkness. The shadow is the part we push aside. The persona is the part we display. And the moment we begin to see our true shadow, the next inevitable consequence is that the persona starts to crack. This is the natural bridge leading us into Part 9, where Jung unveils a truth that is both painful and beautiful. Every personal crisis begins with the collapse of the persona. 1. The persona is the social face, not the real self. In 2 essays on analytical psychology, Jung defines the persona as, the persona is a kind of mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. The persona is the mask we create in order to be loved, be accepted, be praised, belong, appear fine. But because it is a mask, it is not us. We build it to survive society. But it is also what distances us from the soul. 2. We build the persona from what others want, not from what the soul needs. Most of us grow up inside expectations like, you must be strong, you must be capable, you must be patient, you must be successful, you must not be weak, you must not be wrong, you must always be fine. So we construct a flawless persona, always smiling, always solving problems, always taking care of others, always appearing unbothered, unbroken, unstoppable. But inside, we are tired, we are wounded, we long to lean on someone, we ache to be soft. In the undiscovered self, Jung said, the greatest sin is to be unconscious. The sin is not being weak. The sin is being unaware that we are wearing a mask. 3. When we live entirely. Through the persona, the soul begins to rebel. One day, without any big event, without heartbreak, without crisis, the unconscious begins to revolt. And it revolts through exhausted silence. Suddenly we lose motivation. Success feels empty. A life that looks perfect feels meaningless. We stare at everything we built and ask, why can't I feel anything? This is not failure. This is the beginning of persona collapse, the breakdown of the mask. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung wrote, one must become conscious of one's persona in order to dissolve its grip on the soul. We must first realize we are wearing a mask before we can loosen its hold on our life. 4. The crisis of a cracked persona. Not a mistake, but a calling. Many people panic when this crisis begins. Anxiety rises, depression returns, meaning evaporates. Things that once felt right suddenly feel wrong. They believe they are broken. They believe they are weaker. They believe they are failing. But Jung reveals that this is a sign of transformation in the structure and dynamics of the psyche. He wrote, the breakdown of the persona is necessary for the emergence of the true self. The collapse of the persona is the doorway through which the self appears. So the crisis is not a flaw. It is a message. Will you dare to live the life that truly belongs to you? 5. When the persona cracks. 2 questions begin to echo. The first question, is this the life I truly chose? Or is it a life chosen by society, family, invisible expectations, external standards of success, the fear of becoming our real self? The second question, if I no longer have to perform, how do I truly want to live? This is the most painful question, because no one taught us how to answer it. We were taught how to be appropriate, not how to be authentic. 6. The emptiness. after the mask falls, is the space the self needs to enter. The emptiness is not a sign of loss. It is an opening, a space for the real self. Jung describes this in Ion. The self is not only the center, but also the whole circumference, which embraces both conscious and unconscious. When the persona breaks, the self expands, embracing everything we are, both visible and unseen. We begin to live from within, as a unified being, not as a performance. 7. The final truth. The persona is not the enemy. It's the shell we must outgrow. The persona helps us adapt. It protected us when we were young. It is the social armor. But when we mature, that armor becomes a prison. It makes us forget the soul beneath it. Integrating the persona does not mean throwing away the mask. It means knowing we are wearing it, so we never confuse it with our real face. Part 8 showed us the force pulling from the dark, the shadow. Part 9 shows us the mask shining in the light, the persona. These two forces move in opposite directions. When we recognize the shadow, the persona cracks. When the persona cracks, the shadow is released. This is the turning point before we enter Part 10. Individuation, the lifelong process of dying and being reborn into the true self. 10. Individuation, the journey of returning to the true self through cycles of death and rebirth. When we step out of Part 9, where the persona begins to crack, where the social roles no longer satisfy us, where a perfectly acceptable life suddenly feels loose and meaningless, a natural question arises. If I am not the mask, then who am I? This is the moment when the soul pushes us into a deeper, more sacred stage. Individuation, the process Jung called the ultimate purpose of life. In the relations between the ego and the unconscious, Jung wrote, individuation means becoming an individual, and, insofar as individuality embraces our innermost, last, and incomparable uniqueness, it also implies becoming one's own self. Individuation means becoming your own self, not the version others expect, not the social performance, but the unique essence your soul brought into this world. 1. Individuation is not about becoming more positive, but about becoming more whole. Many people mistake this process for self-improvement, becoming better, or becoming more positive. But for Jung, the aim is not to be better, but to be whole. Not perfect, but complete. To become whole means not only loving your light, but seeing your darkness, not only knowing the conscious mind, but speaking with the unconscious, not only holding your strengths, but healing your wounds, not only living through intellect, but through the soul. In Ion, Jung emphasized, the self is a union of opposites. The self is not one extreme, but the marriage of all extremes within us. To reach the self, we must learn to hold the paradoxes of life, light plus shadow, conscious plus unconscious, intellect plus instinct, order plus chaos. Individuation is integration, not elimination. 2. Every crisis is a cycle of death and birth. The old ego dies, so the true self can rise. We often see crisis as failure, losing a job, ending a relationship, burnout, self-doubt, depression, feeling lost. But through Jung's lens, every crisis is a death of an old ego, and every death opens the way for a new layer of the self to rise. In the Red Book, Jung wrote, "Every transformation demands, as its precondition, the ending of a world, the collapse of an old philosophy of life. A transformation requires a world within us to collapse. An old philosophy must fall apart, so a new one can be born. This is why suffering is never meaningless. It is the dismantling process of the soul. We cannot enter a new house if the old structure has not been removed. We cannot step into a new self if the old ego still guards the doorway." 3. Individuation is the only process that requires both light and shadow. In Part 8, we learned about the shadow, the rejected but powerful part of us. In Part 9, we learned about the persona, the mask we wear in society. Individuation requires us to pass through both. Unmask the persona to see the performance. Unlock the shadow to see the truth. Bring both back into one center. Allow them to coexist within the same inner home. In Psychological Types, Jung wrote, "Individuation is an attainment of wholeness. It is the maturation of the soul, becoming a unified totality. To look at our anger, not just our kindness. To face our fear, not just our courage. To acknowledge our wounds, not just our strength. Individuation is the courage to say, 'I am all of these things.'" 4. Suffering is a rite of passage, not a punishment. In the modern age, suffering is seen as something to be eliminated, but Jung saw it as a sacred rite. Suffering is the call of the self. It is the bridge between the old ego and the true self. In CW11, Psychology and Religion, Jung wrote, "There is no birth of consciousness without pain. This is why anxiety is not a sin, depression is not a failure, crisis is not the end. They are signs that the soul's shell is cracking, just like a butterfly must break its cocoon dark, painful, confining, before it can expand into its wings. That pain does not destroy us. It rebirths us." 5. Individuation is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong cycle of death and rebirth. Jung never saw individuation as a destination. It is a lifelong rhythm, a continuous pulse of dying and becoming. Every time we face a fear, step out of a role, break an illusion, leave a misaligned relationship, refuse to be the people pleaser, we die a little. And every time we live more truthfully, open our heart in the right places, choose ourselves, trust our intuition, obey the call of the soul, we are reborn. Individuation is a lifetime woven between collapse and emergence, between endings and green shoots, between darkness and light. If Part 9 showed the cracking of the persona, the social mask, then Part 10 answers the sacred question that arises when the mask falls. Who am I when I no longer have to perform? Individuation is the journey of answering that question, not in a day, not in a few lessons, but over an entire lifetime. Because to become ourselves, we must die many times, and each death expands the self. In the breaking, we meet who we are. In the dissolving, we return to the true home of the soul. 11. Letting go of those who do not value you. The final exam of self-love. As we close Part 10, where individuation appears as a lifelong cycle of death and rebirth, where layer after layer of the old ego must dissolve for the true self to emerge, we begin to look at our life with new eyes. We no longer look only inward. We look at the relationships surrounding us. And right at that meeting point between the inner world and the world of human connection, a profound question arises. If I am returning to my true self, then who in my life still resonates with that true self? This is when we step into one of the most important exams of the healing journey. Letting go of those who do not value us. 1. In relationships, we do not attract people. We attract our deepest beliefs about ourselves. Carl Jung once wrote in CW9, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Human beings do not love from a neutral state. We love from what we believe about ourselves. We attract based on what we believe we deserve. If the unconscious tells us we must work hard to be loved, we will attract those who make us earn affection. If we believe we must endure, we will love those who make us suffer. If we believe we are unworthy of kindness, we will overlook those who treat us well and cling to those who make our heart bleed. Relationships are never just fate, they are reflections of the unconscious. In Ion, Jung states clearly, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. To love from the unconscious is to dream. Only by looking inward do we awaken. 2. Staying with someone who does not value you is the repetition of an old story. When we remain in a relationship where we are not valued, we do not stay because of love. We stay because of a wound. The wound that says we must endure to be loved. The wound that says we must sacrifice to be worthy. The wound that says we must prove our value. The wound that says love is supposed to be painful, scarce, unstable. Jung believed that the unconscious repeats what is unresolved until we dare to face it. In The Psychology of the Transference, he wrote, the unconscious behaves as if it were autonomous, and it forces us into situations we would never consciously choose. The unconscious pulls us toward the familiar, even if the familiar hurts, because it is trying to heal something old. It is not you who chooses this person. It is your wound that chooses them. 3. Letting go is not losing. It is raising your standards for yourself. Society often frames staying as strength and leaving as failure. But through the Jungian lens, letting go is not giving up. Letting go is a declaration, I deserve more than this. Letting go is raising the standard for how you want to be treated, for the level of respect you expect, for the emotional frequency your soul can accept. A person who values you does not make you question your worth. A person who is aligned with you does not make you beg for love. A soul that resonates with you does not make you shrink. Letting go does not diminish your value. It restores the value you once abandoned. 4. Letting go cuts the unconscious loop, freeing the soul from the old script. Each of us carries a script, a story the unconscious reenacts, loving the emotionally distant, enduring the indifferent, becoming the healer for others, sacrificing oneself, receiving less than we give, staying where our soul is exhausted. This script is not written by the conscious mind. It was written by childhood experiences, unresolved wounds, distorted beliefs, buried emotions, memories we have never faced. Letting go of someone who does not value you is cutting the thread that ties you to your old story. You no longer play your old role. You no longer accept the part of the one unworthy of love. You no longer reenact the thing that once broke you. You choose to rewrite the entire script. And only when you let go does the loop finally break. 5. Letting go creates space, and space is the doorway for more aligned connections. The soul cannot receive the new if it is still holding the old. You cannot invite new love while your heart is heavy with relationships that wound you. You cannot find the right person while clinging to someone who does not value you. In the Red Book, Jung wrote, "I must let go for the new to come." Emptiness is not a loss. Emptiness is a signal to the universe I am ready. When we let go, we create space for souls that resonate, connections that uplift, relationships that nourish, people who love without requiring us to shrink or beg. Letting go is opening the door. Letting go is sending the invitation. Letting go is the birth of new love. 6. Letting go of those who do not value you is the final exam of self-love. Healing is not about knowing theories, reading psychology, or memorizing spiritual insights. Healing is action, and the deepest, hardest, most destiny-shaping action is letting go of the person who makes your soul wither, because it requires believing in your worth, believing in your future, believing in the self, believing that love does not come from begging, believing you deserve something better. This is not a decision of the mind. This is a decision of the soul. If Part 10 taught us that individuation is a lifelong cycle of death and rebirth, then Part 11 shows how that cycle plays out in real life. A death and rebirth inside love. The old ego, the one who endured, who stayed silent, who begged, must die. The self, the one who knows their worth, must be born. Letting go of someone who does not value you is not an ending. It is the soul's rite of passage into maturity. 12. The final invitation. Silence, self-choosing, and turning suffering into a collective awakening. As we close Part 11, where letting go of those who do not value us becomes the final exam of self-love, a new stillness begins to spread inside us. No more tug-of-war, no more inner battles, no more trying to convince anyone of anything. We enter a very special stage, the stage after we have chosen ourselves. And in this moment, when the old script has been severed, when the unconscious loop has been stopped, when the heart has just laid down an invisible burden, the soul whispers a quiet, but sacred invitation. Now, stay with yourself. This is where part 12 begins, not through action, but through return, not through speech, but through silence, not through turning outward, but through turning inward. 1. We no longer live to be understood, but to be ourselves, the voice of the self after a long journey. Throughout the earlier stages, we fought to be understood, to be loved, to be seen, to be accepted. But when we have gone deep enough into the darkness, far enough away from the mask, and honest enough with ourselves, we realize we no longer need to be understood. We only need to be ourselves in memories, dreams, reflections. Jung shares, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The greatest privilege of being alive is not to be loved, but to return to oneself. Understanding or misunderstanding is the business of others. Living truthfully is the responsibility of the soul. 2. Accepting that we are inside the cocoon, not a failure, but a sacred stage. The period after letting go, after the mask has cracked, after the shadow has been seen, after the old ego has died, is not instant light. It is the cocoon. Inside the cocoon, we do not reach outward. We do not try to prove anything. We do not seek validation. We do not pretend to be strong. We simply remain within ourselves, not advancing, not retreating, only transforming from the inside. In the Red Book, Jung expresses this clearly. What is in the depths must first appear on the surface. What lies in the deepest layers needs time to rise. The cocoon is sacred waiting. No one sees what happens inside, but that is where the entire architecture of the soul is being rearranged. We are not weakening. We are being reprogrammed. 3. Choosing silence. Choosing release. Choosing to walk away. The revolutionary act of the new self. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is not surrender. Silence is not a lack of strength. Silence is the choice of someone who finally understands themselves. In Psychological Types, Jung says, in each of us, there is another whom we do not know. When we become silent, we finally hear that other one, the deep inner presence that life's noise has drowned out for years. Now, our silence is no longer fear. It is a boundary. I no longer need to convince you of my truth. I no longer need to win arguments. I no longer live to keep anyone comfortable. Silence is the voice of the one who has crossed the death of the old ego. 4. Choosing yourself not through words, but through presence. Whenever Jung spoke of the self, he emphasized sovereignty. The self does not shout. The self does not ask for permission. The self does not justify. The self simply is. And that presence is enough. In Aion, Jung writes, the self is our life's goal and the center of our being. When we choose ourselves, we place the self where it belongs at the center. Choosing yourself is not selfishness. Choosing yourself is the soul returning to its rightful order. 5. Turning suffering into a collective awakening. When your personal story becomes a shared light. It is no coincidence that those who have walked through profound suffering often become sources of healing for others. Those who have touched the bottom of the unconscious, who have faced the shadow, who have endured the collapse of the persona, who have wandered through the loneliness of individuation, carry within them a depth that words rarely capture. In CW 18, Jung writes, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. Within every individual's chaos, there is a hidden structure. And when we share our story truthfully, others begin to recognize that this structure also exists inside themselves. When we write down our experiences, when we speak from the soul, when we allow ourselves to be seen, someone out there, hurting in silence, suddenly feels less alone. Our story becomes a shared space of healing. This is the essence of true connection, not through smiles, but through the cracks where light enters." 6. The journey of suffering becomes a journey of awakening. Pain does not disappear. It transforms. Loneliness does not vanish. It becomes a place where we learn to listen inwardly. Silence is not empty. It becomes protection. Letting go does not leave us hollow. It opens new possibility. And our story, once a wound, becomes light in the undiscovered self. Jung affirms only the individual can create the new, never the group. It is the individual soul, the one who has walked through darkness, that makes transformation possible for the collective. If Part 11 is the final exam of self-love, letting go of those who do not value us, then Part 12 is the reward, a quiet, sacred stage, where the soul returns to itself and transforms its pain into light for others. We do not live only for ourselves. We live as small fragments in humanity's collective healing. This is Jung's final invitation. Turn your darkness into someone else's light.